All right, and hello. Welcome back. Okay, so I've been on a little bit of a break because I was trying to figure out how I wanted to do this, and I think now I have a better plan. So with that being said, let us begin. Okay, so hi, I'm Gigi from JK Collectives. I am hosting this podcast called Visual Kei The Podcast. In this podcast, we're going to talk about all different types of visual K bands and their genres for sure. So let's just start with the basics. So let's talk about visual K. What is visual K? Visual K is a subgenre of Japanese rock music that began in the 80s. The genre is known for its shocking aesthetics, visuals, and androgynous clothing styles. Of course, within the visual K, there are many subgenres. So, as you can see by the title of today, we are going to be discussing Wafuu Kei. I do really enjoy this genre. With Wafuu Kei, today, since we're going to be discussing the genre Wafuu Kei, we're going to talk about two notable bands from past to present. Those bands is Virushana and Kiryu. One thing with Virushana, they also go by Virushana. Okay, so let's talk about in general what is Wafuu Kei. So, what is Wafuu Kei? Wafuu Kei basically is a subgenre that centers around ancient Japan, and kimonos are very prevalent within that style. The only way to be considered a Wafuu Kei band is by staying in the concept for the majority of the band's activity. So some groups will do smaller things where it's like one or two promotions centers around this type of theme, but the rest, especially like around the New Year's time and things like that, but the rest is whatever their usual genre is. But this is mainly a visuals type of genre. The music definitely has a distinctness to it, but not every band that's a Wafuu Kei band falls under the same genre of music, if that makes sense. But since that is the case, and we're going to talk about a band that kind of transitioned into this, and it's sort of a fun story in my opinion. So for the first band we're going to talk about is Virushana. They are kind of the first known band to start the subgenre Wafuu-kei. Okay. They started in 1995 as a Kotei-kei band, but then they transitioned into a Wafuu-kei band in 1999 by wearing kimonos on stage. The story behind that, though, is kind of funny because the vocalist, Miss Suzu, had a relative that sold them discount kimonos, and that just became their look because obviously that was cheaper than trying to find newer outfits, like newer aesthetics sticking within that koteke genre. So they began to wear kimonos on stage as of 1999. And that basically sort of solidified the rest of their career. They are basically known to have started the Wafuu Kei genre. They in 1995, that is when the group began. They were a Kote K band. They actually ended up transitioning into a Wafuu Kei band in 1999 by wearing kimonos on stage. However, musically, they were still the same. So this is where the visual did not have to necessarily change with the music. So the reason why though that they transitioned to kimonos on stage is because the vocalist Misuzu had a relative that sold them discounted kimonos, and then that became their look, right? So however their music basically stayed the same, like I stated before, but the kimonos came about because it was an easier fashion sense for them to keep going with because it was at a discount. Let's talk about the band. The band Virushana formally disbanded in 2003, and they are from the Niigata area. So, as I've stated plenty of times before, they are a Wafuu Kei in style, Kote Kei in music genre. I will be doing an episode where I break down as many of the subgenres that exist. But let's talk about the band members. There isn't a whole lot about these band members that I could find, but that's okay just because when it's an earlier 1990s to early 2000s band, some of the information is a little shaky. Um, but we have the vocalist Misuzu, whose birthday was November 18th, the guitarist Rui, whose birthday was 10/17, Drummer Kana birthday was January 5th, is January 1st, 5th. And then a former member, but not entirely, and I'll talk about that in a second, is Sada, who was the bassist. His birthday was February 26th, and then he left in 2002. As a total, they have about 48 releases and 58 songs. As I stated earlier, so just going a little bit through their history, the band began in 1995. They really solidified their current lineup that we know about in 1996. March of 97, they joined the record label Soleil. Between 1997 and 1998, that's when they really started touring consistently, with either giant events, meaning, right, that there's multiple bands, just like when I was talking about the Masked event that happened in May, multiple bands on the same roster, or they were doing two-man live. 1999 is when they began hosting their own one-man tours, and then basically from there consistently toured from basically to the end of 2000. Things seem to have gotten shaky. There wasn't a whole lot of information of when they changed record labels, but things basically got shaky in 2002, where they were being managed by a group called Inner Dream, but they left them because of poor management, and then they went on to create their own label. Their label was called Virus, but given the time frame, 2003 was kind of the end of them. 2002, Sada left, and then the band basically paused activity because of that, because they needed to find a new bassist. But basically ended up calling it a quits in 2003. But again, there's some unclear moments in this timeline, because it does also state that there was a release in 2004 of their first EP, Kai Koroko. Sorry, give me a second. Kai Koroku Dain Dainiban Sujoban. Okay, so that was their first EP that then they re-released in 2004. But from that, that was kind of the end of Virushana. They did not end up finding a new bassist. Ways that you can still listen to their music is, of course, we have fans that love to archive. So there's definitely music videos and albums on YouTube from fan uploads. But in terms of streaming them on Spotify, Apple Music, whatever you listen to, there are no official releases. Okay, and so the next group that I really wanted to talk about, because again, I'm a fan of BP Records in terms of the bands they have on there. We're going to talk about Kiryu, because I think personally, from my experience in Visual Kei, they were my introduction to Wafuu Kei. I was like, ooh, I am enjoying this. This is so cool. But as I was kind of doing my research, I realized there was another group that I should have partnered with Kiryu, which is called Kagura, which really kind of solidifies the style Kiryu is. Because Kiryu is Wafuu Kei. They don't divert from Wafuu Kei. Even their music is Wafuu Kei. And Kagura, I think, is a group that was in the 90s, early 2000s that I think probably helped influence this way of music. Okay, so let's go over some of the basics. Kiryu is a Wafuu Kei band. Their sound is mixed with Enka, metal and rock, definitely. They started in 2007 and was active until 2023, when they paused their activity. Again, I want to state that they are paused. They have not said they disbanded. Nothing like that. Okay. But they are paused. They signed with BP Records in 2009. So these members I have a little bit more background on, just because I think the first group, Virushana, was basically Virushana. That was their life. It was hard to figure out what they did after, or if they were in bands before. So Virushana is who they are. But with Kiryu, there is a lot that we can kind of backtrack into. So they are a 5-piece band, but they're currently running, well, actually, there's a little bit of back and forth between this, but they were a 5-piece band. Their current lineup is a 4-piece band. We'll talk about it in a second, though. we'll come back. So you have the vocalist Mahiru Kurosaki. Before joining Kiryu in 2007, he had 7 other short-lived visual kei projects and bands. His first group was Lieutenant, and that was in 2002, and that band ended up disbanding in 2003. He originally started his stage name as Hina. He His last official band was Madara. The group was active from 2004 to 2007, and they were a Koteke band. We'll circle back to them as a group to talk about for sure. And his birthday is October 19th. Just a little fun fact. Love to say their birthday. But he is the vocalist. And he definitely was in, like I said, 7 other short-lived visual kei groups, and they did vary in terms of style. Okay, so now we have the guitarist Mitsuki Sakai. His birthday, February 24th. He's basically kept the same stage name throughout his whole entire career. And I'm gonna say he's part of the brains behind Kiryu. But before we get into that, he was in 6 different visual kei bands and projects. This one is interesting because he kind of stayed with the same lineup the whole entire time. So before joining Kiryu, he was in 6 different visual kei bands. His first band was Utena in 2001. Okay, with Utena, they changed multiple times with different names but similar lineups, meaning they had a lot of the same members. So he was part of Utena, that then changed to Re, that then changed back to a second iteration of Utena. This is where he met one of the guitarists of Kiryu, Takamasa Kujo. We'll talk about him in a second. And then they basically sort of stayed together on that same path. It then changed to a group called Mizaria. And then finally, they changed into an Oshare K group. Because the other ones I think were more on the Kotoke, Minherake type bands, heavier, that kind of thing. They did end up changing to an Oshare K band, which was called Shoyu Kayo K. Oh, sorry. Let me rephrase that. They officially changed to an Oshare K and Showa Kayo K band called Inshu Tokushu Ongaku Mizaria. And that lasted from 2002 to 2005. And then the last group that he was in was Kurara Zero Shiki, which then was that 2005 to 2007 time. Okay. So, but he kind of stayed around with the same people. During, so now that we all know that Kiryu, as of right now, is paused activity, Mitsuku Sakai is basically kind of keeping that up a little bit. His solo project, which is called Mitsuki Sakai. Um, he was featured on Mass 2026 as part of the lineup. And it seems to what he has done as of now, I don't know what his next releases are going to look like, but currently he has one EP, and basically there are re-recordings of Kiryu's hits, which I think is kind of interesting because listening to the 2 vocalists, and also this kind of makes sense, but listening to the 2 vocalists, definitely 2 different styles of singing for sure, if we're talking about the original versus Mitsuki Sakai. But that being said, that's kind of where he is in everything. Then we have the bassist Hiyori Ishiki. His birthday is November 1st. He was part of 3 short-lived V-Kei groups, starting with Rasphere in 2003, and they disbanded in 2005. Then he did 2 short 1-year groups called Crazy Mama and Den Quixote, which was an Oshare K group, until he finally found his home in 2007 with Kiryu. His stage name definitely changed as well, from Yori to Hiyori, and now it's Ishiki Hiyori. During his pause, he did end up joining another V-Kei group in 2024 named Gatucho. And that group is still active, but he seceded after a year. And then we have drummer Junji Tokai. Birthday is January 11th. Kiryu seems to be his first and only major band. So that's also telling me he's probably like the youngest member of this Visual Kei group. But he was at once support. He used to be support musicians, and now while they're on hiatus, he is basically a support musician as well. And then we're going to talk about former member and guitarist Takemasa Kujo. Looking at the images that keep popping up, he is the one that is in green. I'm realizing I'm not talking about the outfits that they're wearing, but his birthday is August 3rd. He basically followed the same path as Mitsuki Sakai, starting with the second iteration of Utena. That's where those two met, and then they've kept that on for that basically up until he decided to take a pause. Um, but interestingly enough, this is not something that normally happens within the Visual Kei world, but because they do somewhat fall under the whole idol world, even though they are obviously rock musicians, and we could probably argue back and forth the difference between them being idols and whatever. However, he did have to there was a rumor back in 2019 of him being married or dating somebody, which I'm like, okay, these are again grown men, but I'm not going to get into the whole thing about idol culture and musician culture and all that stuff. But basically he had to make a public announcement that he had been married since 2017. Very serious announcement. It was a whole big deal, but he continued on with his career in 2019. But of course, just like anything else, it does, the idea of being married or dating somebody and you are a musician and idol is sort of still taboo, and it's still kind of taboo pretty much now. um, but I'm hoping we're getting a little bit better with that, just a little bit. In December 16th, 2021, that was his last in person performance, as he then decided to announce that he will be stepping away from physical performances with Kiryu, but he would stay behind scenes helping with music. Now, I don't have any updates on whether he still was doing that after 2021, but kind of cross my fingers. The music stayed within that same genre, so I think he was enjoying that. Of course, I feel like I read this somewhere. I'm not trying to create rumors or anything like that, but I do believe what was basically kind of going around him going on that hiatus of not performing was probably family life. I mean, he was married, so that makes sense. And there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so those are the individual members and kind of where they are. So let's talk about the facts of the band. How many albums, songs, and singles do they have? Um, Basically, their last single was released 2022, July 13th, 2022, titled Kodoku. They have 8 albums and 25 singles and EPs. I'm not including the different versions because when it comes to getting CDs in um, for Visual Kei artists, as we know, they have a lot of different versions of the same EP, of the same album, whatever it might be, however they're releasing it, because some EPs will come with an A, B, C, D, A having like music videos and special content on it, B maybe having instrumentals. So it all kind of just depends on how they're releasing it. So I just went with the basic titles and not all the different versions of their but that being said, they have 8 albums and 25 singles and EPs. They have two compilation albums. One was the greatest hit album from 2007 to 2017. And then they were part of the BP's party album that was released in 2015. That also had my boys Roy's. Some significant tours and information from them. They went on their first national wide tour in 2012. Basically, most shows were sold out and they performed to over 15,000 people. So they already had a really good following. Yes, they were a group that started in 2007, but they had a pretty strong following and started going on nationwide tours in 2012. They had also their first set of international shows in 2012. They performed in South Korea, China, and Hong Kong. On July 31st, 2015, they performed at Nippon Budokan, which is a pretty huge venue, especially for a lot of smaller artists or visual K groups and bands. Of course, like if you're one of the um, well known VK groups, this is a place that you have performed in multiple times, but for a group like Kiryu, um, this is a big deal. I think this is like that big stepping stone for most VK groups. Anyways, so they performed at Nippon Budokan, and they performed there 3 times. Just to give some background on this venue, it is an indoor arena that was used for the 1964 Olympics. Um, it holds a capacity of 14,471, and it is known for its great acoustics. The Beatles was the first rock group to ever perform there in 1966. They even have a live album from that location. That just tells you how good the acoustics are. Okay, so after announcing their 15th anniversary tour in 2020, um, Mahiru revealed that he would be taking a break at the end of this tour after being diagnosed with anxiety disorder and depression. The 3 remaining members were like, "We're gonna keep going. We'll continue as normal," which makes sense on why guitarist Mitsuki Sakai decided to probably re-record some of the albums, or sorry, some of their songs, uh, because he was doing the vocals because he could. Anyways, so band tried to continue as a 3-piece band, but they basically at the end of 2023 called for a hiatus, indefinite hiatus. So hopefully they will make it back together as a group, but right now, like I said, they are on pause. Some facts about some fun facts. Um, 5 of Kiryu's singles reached number 1 on the Oricon Independent Singles Chart in 2011, which was kind of again unheard of for a VK group. Um, then here's a really cute fact: they had an alternative no alternate ego band called Dragon, um, which was basically just the English translation of their of their band name, which is Kiryu. And it's a really cute concept because basically the members changed their names. So the vocalist was Dendi Mari, the guitarist was Cherry Sanshiro, the guitarist Beauty Tama, bassist Penti Hiwai, and drummer Pretty Suzu. They debuted in 2010 and then officially quote unquote disbanded in 2018. Their concept was basically cute and poppy princessly princesses, which is the exact opposite of what Kiryu is. Um, and they released 3 singles in 2011, 2014, and 2016. They performed live occasionally and had sometimes as an opening act for Kiryu. One of the things, this was a dancing idol, like they were idols. That was the aesthetic, was them acting as idols. So they were just decided to do something like this. But like I said, they perform live occasionally and sometimes as an opening act for Kiryu. Also, as they did perform as Dragon, or sometimes you might find them as My Dragon, the profits and proceeds that they got from this sort of alternative group of theirs went to uh, went to charities such as the victims of the 2011 Toko, um, Tohoku earthquake and the tsunami, and Kumamoto earthquake in 2016. So a lot of that was more philanthropy work and was going towards charities. And then they would also perform every year on April 1st, just because, again, it was a fun little thing that they were creating and doing. And then they officially performed their last performance April 1st, 2018. Okay, so with this group, as I said, you can find all of their stuff on streaming. You can find all their albums. You can find. Let's talk about their music because those were all of their really fun facts, what they're all about, what they're currently doing now. So now this is the part where I'd like to give song recommendations. So again, with their music, that what I think really drew me to Kiryu as a group was, and this was because of my limited knowledge with different visual K groups. I know there are others that sound very similar. Um, very similar in the way that they use similar um, instruments and ways to produce their music. So with that being said, like I said, this group kind of had a special place for me just because of the fact that it was the first time for me hearing a group, probably back in, I want to say 2019, where it was so heavily influenced by Japanese traditional instruments. And I know there are other groups that do similar type styles, and we will talk about them as well. But this was my introduction. And so here are my song recommendations in no particular order because there's so many good um, songs. And one thing, like, this is what I would say drives the difference between vocalist Mahiro Kurosaki and guitarist Mitsuki Sakai. Somehow, I do not know, but Mahiro Kurosaki is just able to throw his voice in so many different ways and so many different octaves. I'm curious if he had any real training with that kind of style because it does sound like if you went to go see a kabuki show or a no performance or a kabuki performance, like the way he can just throw his voice out there and the way the music just complements it. And sometimes it feels like you can hear such anguish in his voice. Not saying that that's the feeling, but it just really has a really great emotional quality to it, along with something that just, from my ears and listening, sounds very traditional, and I really enjoy listening to it. It still has your rock, it still has your metal. It definitely is truly a mixture of Inca metal and rock. Okay, like we can't deny any of that. So my recommendations are, so on this list, one of the things is Hiroshige. Okay, I'm gonna say some of these names very slow because I'm trying to say them correct. And they are known for sometimes having some very long titles. Okay, so the first song that I'm recommending is Haru Shigure. Again, really due to those introductions of traditional instruments, the Enka style. Again, I just love the way that his voice is thrown and then the way that he growls in his music. And it always just seems like the band in general are having a great time performing. The next, this can be found on the album Ten Shorine. Ten Ten Shorine. This album came out in 2018. Another recommendation from this particular album is Kurayami Nimado Isorogato. Kind of again for that same thing, throwing his voice around and the emotions behind it. But those two are on the same album. Then we do see what album from the EP. Okay, the next one we have is from 2019. Tama Tamaki no Hasin Akikago, and it's from that same EP. It's the first song on that EP. It's named the same. 2019 is when that came out. And then the next recommendation I have is Okuraman, and that is from, oh no, where's that one from? No, I got it. I got it right here. That is from Watashi Hakarai Saragatsuwana Suwanon no ni Ningyo. Okay, hold on. Watashi Hakai. I don't know why there's not spaces in these. Like I think I know. Like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Watashi Hakairai Sarugutsuano Ningyo. And that came out in 2017 from that EP. And the song that I'm recommending from that EP is Okaraman. Karaman. And last but not least, from I think their last album that they put out, from their last album, I only don't know why. That okay. Anyways, from their last album from 2021, Manju Shage, we have the song Hotaru. That's a nice 6 minute and uh, 58-second song. That's just, again, musically, he's throwing his voice around. On top of that, it just has a lot of different elements within it, and I do truly enjoy listening to this song. All right, well, with that, that is the end of this. If there are any artists you want me to particularly listen to, please put them in the comments. You can find me on all the social medias. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Spotify. You can find me on Apple. You can find me on Instagram at JK Collective. You can find me on Instagram, and it will be below. Where I got a lot of my information today is this beautiful website, V-Kei.gy. They have a lot. I mean, that's just one giant encyclopedia of visual Kei information. I got some information from Wikipedia. I also got some information from fandom.com. I've also got some of the information from, I don't know why I'm tilting. I also got some of the information from Crimson Lotus, along with, there was one other website that I don't know why. Oh, jrock.com. So there is, all of this information is from the interwebs that I compiled here. If you have any questions, any corrections, let me know. And with that, I will see you next time. Bye.